Are your inadequacies in life getting you down? Well, don't try to fix the Stormy Archer gear system, because that's what I did, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. No, but seriously, guys, I've fixed other systems, Shimano. I'm just not used to Stormy Archer. Got my head around it finally, so hopefully I can show you how that works in this video. Let's start off with the simple stuff, the brakes. I'm not the biggest fan of caliper brakes. I always found them tricky to set up in the past, but these appear to be good quality. They've got some adjustment on them, and of course they're usually used because they're lightweight. I believe these are the original brakes. I think they may have changed the design since then for newer models. But what I did change, which I don't like, is having the front brake on the left lever. That's the European system. I'm sure you've noticed that when you go abroad, and it confuses the hell out of me, especially when I'm jumping from one bike to another and my other bike's got the right lever set up. So I swapped those over. It shouldn't be too complicated to do if you want to do it, or make any difference to this video and how you learn. But essentially, you know, it's just swapped over the cables and the housing. So let's take a close look at the caliper and how we adjust it. You're going to need a 2.5mm Allen key and an adjustable spanner. So all you do is, there's that bolt on there, make sure you tighten it well onto the nut. Okay, and that is it, and you can see that the caliper is released. Now the brake pads, you want to check them from time to time. These look in pretty good shape, as you can probably see, but more often than not they're worn to one side or the other, and you may want to adjust that with this bolt here. This is going to be a 5mm Allen key, and you also want it to sit exactly on the rim. It's important you don't hit the tyre, and it'd be much better stopping power if it actually hits nice and square on there. You could argue that could go a little bit lower, so let's try that. So all you do is loosen that off, bring that close to the rim, wiggle it down a little bit until it's sitting. I want it to sit ideally perfectly in the middle of that rim. There we go. And then what you want to do is tighten that up. The problem with tightening it up is it wants to twist the pad, so you kind of got to hold the pad in place. It helps to have some grips to stop the pad rotating when you want to tighten it up. Let's just check that. So I could actually do with being rotated just a fraction forward, but I'm just going to do that with the grips. It's a little bit too much. So when you push that in, that's sitting more or less in the middle of the rim. You can't see under here, but this is a slightly wider pad, so the pad is covering that entire rim. Because we're resetting everything, we need to make sure that the barrel adjuster is all the way in, which it is, and then just back it off a few turns, so we've got a little bit of room to adjust afterwards. Now we need to reattach the cable and reset the brakes. It's probably a two-man job. It's quite hard to do this on your own. I can just about do it myself. And what you're trying to do is you want to set the pad so it's 1/2 mil or a mil off of the rim of the wheel. So hold that there and try to hold that with this hand. And what I find is I don't actually have to set this 1/2 mil or a mil off, because for some reason, maybe there's obviously some slack in the system somewhere. As I tighten this and then I let go, it seems to spring back to the perfect gap. Of course, you've always got that. The beauty of this now is you've got that that tolerance in the barrel adjuster that we just allowed for. So if you see now, that is absolutely perfect. There's a mil either side. And so that's probably something to do with some slacking or the way I'm holding it, I'm not sure, but just hold it tight on there and tighten it up, and then it will reset itself. And if you want your brakes to be a bit more spongy, not so tight, you can play around with the barrel adjuster on the brake lever. Now this is where the 2.5mm Allen key comes in. You've got this little grub screw here. And what that does is that lines it up perfectly centrally, because you may find that the brakes are not grabbing. They should grab equal on both sides, right? So if you look at that, the one on the right looks like it's moving more than the one on the left. I don't know which way this is going to turn it, but I'll give it a go. It's still moving more on the right. Now it's moving more on the left, so somewhere between there. So you just play around with that until you get it perfectly even on both sides. Within reason. Don't spend your whole life doing it. Okay, that should just about do it. Something I should mention also is cabling is incredibly important on Brompton, because otherwise your cable's going to rub, they're going to bend the wrong way, and they're going to catch on different things. So there are diagrams online, but you can see here that all the rear brake cable and the 2 gear cables just run straight from the back here, all on this side, all on the right hand side of the bike, all the way through. There's a little loop, metal loop there. They run through that, and then they run up here. Now what I've done is, before there was a little clip that splits actually the front brake cable, but it holds on there and then it gathers together these 3 cables. Now you could zip tie those together, I reckon, but I've removed that because, well, I replaced the gear cable and I couldn't be bothered to split it in 2, plus the clip was broken on mine. So I would suggest you just run them all straight and then run some zip ties around there. And as I said, last time I swapped the brakes over, because I prefer to have them on the right like we do in England, and not have them swapped around like they do on the Brompton, presumably for easier cabling. But I've made everything, I've changed my outer cables to be slightly longer, so it all works fine. The only other issue I found was you have to make sure that this is kept fairly short, because as you turn the wheel, if you don't keep it that short, now that's not touching the cable, but when I had it before, it was rubbing. This is one of the original M6 Bromptons. It's a 6-speed, and I'll take you through all the components of the drivetrain now. 3-speed shifter here, 2-speed shifter here, controlling the derailleur here, and this would be the internal gear hub, which is controlled by this chain here, which is pulled by the wire. So that's basically it. It's a Sturmey Archer internal gear hub, and I'll show you how to fit all that and adjust the gears. And whilst we're taking this off, one of the jockey wheels is broken, so I'm going to replace that. Right, first thing you need to do is, there's a quick release button on there. Press that, and that releases this bolt. Unscrew this, just gets in the way otherwise. You can see it's got a little thread on it, chain. Then we're going to need an adjustable spanner. Just undo that nut. It's that easy to get that off. And if you want to go a step further and take the back wheel off, it's got a nut and a locking washer there and on the other side. So you just got to undo those two nuts, and if you don't want to undo this cable, deflate the tyre and then take the wheel out. Otherwise you've got to reset up your brakes, so that's what I would recommend. It's much easier to deflate the tyre. You can see here it got all mash up. I don't know how that happened, but in any case I had to buy a new kit, two of them, part number Q101511. There's no getting around that. I couldn't buy a cheap knockoff. So you have to pop off a little cap here. You've got an Allen bolt inside, 2.5mm. And make sure you put back in there. I'm going to use the original bushing that was in there. Seems to be fine. So new wheel, pop that back in and do that up. Let's check it spins. Yep. I just pop my two caps. Pop a cap in the derailleur. Okay, that's good. Now when you mount this back on, you have to make sure that the chain is sitting on top of this before you start tightening down your bolt. That's why I took that chain out, because it gets in the way when you're trying to do this. Put your washer on, bolt. Go. Put it under there like that, so it looks like a normal derailleur, sort of figure of 8 thing. Now we need to put that back in, but you can't really do it sideways, you've got to allow gravity to do it. So I'm going to lay the bike down on the floor. Can need gravity to help you get it in. Okay, and that is, I can feel it's caught the thread, so that's fine. Okay, and then we're going to pop that back in there. Have to unscrew it a little bit to make it reach. Okay, now we can look at the cable and see how that's connected in there, and then I'll show you how to adjust it all. So I cut off the ferrule on the end. Ferrule? Is it ferrule? Is it wild? Okay, that's 2.5mm Allen key. Undo that grub screw. That releases that. Then that literally just pulls through that housing there. We don't need to pull it out. I just wanted to show you. I'm not going to show you how to remove the shifter. It's just a 3mm Allen bolt. Undo that and it undoes the clamp. Obviously you have to remove the brake lever first. This is just a 2mm Allen key. So it's all quite everything on this bike is different to what I'm used to. I'm used to normal brake cables with the ferrule on the end, but in this case they're all slightly different. Just pull it off. Just try and remember it all goes back together. You see, there's a different ferrule to a normal brake cable. It's a special one for Stormy Archer gear changes. Now what you would do, because the other end of the cable is open as you saw, you'd have to pass it down through, there's a hole in the middle of that metal lug, whatever you want to call it, and you pass that down through there and that locks that in place so it can't pull out. So we'll just reassemble that. I'm actually always looking for videos like this. That's why I make these, because I just think, I don't know, I'm inquisitive, but I just think it's useful to know what these things look like on the inside, even if you don't need to replace them. But surely you're going to have to replace the gear changer at some point. So you have to actually pull it out part of the way, and then you can slot that on like so. Then you can push it back in. Make sure your gear cable is in, and then we can pop that back on. Just make sure that's all nicely sitting in there. This is what I mean about Bromptons. I guess they've had to make them a little bit more complicated to achieve the desired result, but for example, 2.5mm instead of 2mm like the other one. So that's different, and then you'll see what I mean in here. So instead of undoing the cable at the back, this runs opposite. The ferrule is at the other end, not the shifter end, which you're about to see. But I guess they have a reason for it. It's just getting used to it. Okay, you can see that cable is held in there, and that's a very small Allen key. Yeah, it's a 1mm. So you're definitely going to need your full kit for this one. Okay, if I'm going to draw that through, I'm going to need to cut that cable, otherwise it'll get stuck in the housing. Let's pop that off for now. Now we will go down the other end. Okay, we're going to delve right in the back here. You can see what I'm doing. And what we need to do is to undo, there's an Allen bolt in the end of here, 3mm. You need to undo that. That's a spring on the other side of that, so it's all going to come loose. And I'm going to be cursing. I can't get it back together. There we go. So that is your cable ferrule sat inside a spring. I'll just get some needle nose pliers. So I can pull that out of there. And that sits inside that whole unit, which can be taken apart, but there's absolutely no need right now. Just pop that back in there. So here we have the original cable on the left, and behind it you'll see a brand new cable. Now they're not identical, but the one on the left is the official Brompton cable, and the nipple on the end is a approximately 3x5mm nipple, whereas the one I've bought is a 2.8x4mm nipple. But the one on the left is about 16 quid, being typically bespoke to Brompton, whereas the one I've got on the right I got off eBay for about £4. I mean, normally you expect to pay about £2 for a gear cable, so I'm not willing to spend 16 quid on a cable, so that's why I got this cheaper one. I've used it before, it works, so now we're going to thread that back into the bike and set it all up again. Okay, now we do everything in reverse. Except that we have to, it's unlikely I'm going to be able to push that through. Oh, there we go, I twisted it actually. I do find that sometimes you twist it. Okay, now it's jammed again. So we need to go further up the line and ease it into the, it's probably in the main cable now. Okay, yeah, it's got stuck there. Let's pull that through. This is where it can start to fray, so you've got to be careful. Also twist it in the direction of the twist. It's probably getting jammed on the inside, we might have to take that cap off. Yep, we have to make that hole. Put this on here first. And then we need to make that hole a little bit bigger with a bradawl. Or a nail. Whatever you have to hand, really. Just to widen out that inner plastic liner. There we go. Back in action. This is what I mean about Bromptons. Because they're so small, everything is so small and fiddly to fix on it. So what I've had to do is go up the other end and pull the cable through. Because it's sprung loaded, it wants to pop back into that cable housing, so I've managed to pull it through very carefully and now grab it with my mole grips, as long as I don't let go of those. Otherwise you'd never get this grub screw in. I know this is not a job you'd do a lot, but if you want to change the cable, this is what you have to do. Okay, that's in. Now I can let go of the cable. Okay, now we pass the cable back up through there. There's that cap on the end needs to sit up inside. There's a little adjuster nuts there, which presumably can adjust some sort of tension on the cable. Pull that through as much as we can, and then it passes through the top of here, and you can see there's only one way it can come out. I'll try and twist it so I don't fray the cable, twist it in the right direction. Although it does not seem to want to come out. There we go. Okay, before that tries to work its way off, we'll just clamp a ferrule on the end. A ferrule. Now we'll run through the gears and see what needs adjusting. To explain how this works, this is your mech. Even though it's in the rear, kind of imagine it like your front mech, because what this does is it gives you the two different sets of gears. So in one position this is going to give you gears 1 to 3, and in the other position it's going to give you gears 4 to 6. So I'm going to turn the pedals and change the gear, and you'll see it move. Okay, so this is the easier set. So this is gears 1 to 3, and now we're in gears 4 to 6. And the adjustment on these things, you probably see here, is these two grub screws. So in this position, if I wind that all the way in, you see it moving it out. And what that may do is prevent it from changing all the way down. So let's give that a try. Yeah, it doesn't want to change down unless I allow that. It doesn't want to change to gears 4 to 6. Okay, and then similarly, if we screw that all the way in, it doesn't want to change up to gears 1 to 3, to the easier gears. So that's easy. Then we'll move on to the internal gear hub. this just shows you how old this Brompton is, because the more modern ones don't have this SRAM gear adjuster. They've got like a little barrel nut on it, and with those ones you just have to look for with the pin I showed you. I'm not going to pull it all the way out, but there was a unthreaded part and a non-chain part further in. Anyway, you can see 1 millimeter of that through the hole, so I'm not entirely sure what the indicator hole in this is meant to tell you, because all you can see is a bit of chain. But from what I can tell, the only way to really adjust these is to just get it looking right, which I'm about to show you. So the way you're going to set this up is to, it doesn't actually matter where this portion is relative along this cable. So you could have more of this exposed and this connector be further up this cable, or further down like this. It doesn't really matter, so long as that chain is not too slack and is not too tight. If you do it too tight, it will start off too far out. It will pull on. It's already pulling on the hub inside, the gears inside the hub. And if you have it too loose, it's not going to change very well. So you just want to do it. This is the only information I've found online, and what seems to work. These are not the greatest things in the world. It's just do it so that this is fairly taut but not super taut. And you'll know, because when you can change the gears like I'm about to do now, it just works easily. So now I'm in gear 1. Okay, I'm going to go down to gear 2, it's got a little bit harder. Gear 3. Okay, now I'm going to change the way back up again. And I'm going to go to the second set of gears. And I'm going, so now I'm in gear 4, 5, 6. The hardest gear, or the fastest gear. Well, that is it, guys. I've taught you everything I know about Bromptons, the good and the bad, and I'm really glad that I finally got my head around it so I can look after this thing. I'll be making more videos on bike mechanics and other subjects, so keep checking up on the channel, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers!